Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. This is the group on the book Flow by Csikszentmihalyi. We are already on chapter 5, which is the chapter all about the body in flow. And if you've joined us for any of the previous meetup groups on this topic, Maritza and I decided we're going to do this one a little bit differently because as we read through the chapter, we both agreed that the topics in this chapter we both feel are really fascinating. There's so many interesting ways to explore all of the ways that the body can be in flow. But it seemed that Csikszentmihalyi, MC as I often like to call him, in this chapter particularly, one, you could tell he was writing back in the early 90s. It seems there's so many ways that we've advanced culturally and in our knowledge of science since the time he wrote. And in my opinion, you can almost tell he's someone who even grew up back in the 50s. So we thought it might be more beneficial with this chapter. We do have a presentation. We have some wonderful slides that Maritza put together. We're going to start with a summary of what came before. So if you haven't read the chapter, that's perfectly all right. We're definitely going to make this so whether you've read it or whether you haven't, we're definitely going to make it so you can get a lot of value out of this. We're going to give a quick summary of everything that came before, the important things, so that you're all caught up for what you need to know for this chapter. And then as we go through this chapter, instead of, as we've normally done, spending so much time on what MC says, the different topics, we're going to give you the slides, we're going to give you the summary presentation of his thoughts, but we really want to open up all of these different topics to all of you. My sense is that those of us who are here in attendance, because when we're talking about the body and flow, we all have bodies, we've all been in flow, so there should be, I believe one of these topics should speak to at least everyone. So hopefully we'll be able to really bring in the wisdom of all the participants here on the meeting to discuss what it's like for the body to be in flow. Anything you want to add to that, Maritza?
Sorry. No, I think you've covered it all. Just to let you guys know that I'm going to go ahead and post in the chat for you a link so that you guys can grab the presentation, just in case you want to go off and read each of the slides in detail yourself. Since for this session, we're not going to read all the lines in each slide, since we want a little more interactiveness today. I'm excited. Let's get started.
All right, so this is Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience by Csikszentmihalyi. And here was just a quick summary of what flow is. The way I even just summarize flow really quickly is that it's defined as that state of both peak performance and optimal experience when you both feel your best and perform your best. And then there's this quick description here. It's the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience itself is so enjoyable that people will do it even at great cost. And here was one of the most important graphs to describe and present in visual terms what the flow experience is like. This is the idea of the challenge skills balance. So one of the key ideas we've learned is that flow happens in this challenge where you find that perfect sweet spot between your challenges and your skills. If the challenges are too high, as this graph shows, you're just going to experience anxiety, frustration, fear. But if the challenge is too low for the skills that you've already had, you're just going to feel boredom, lack of interest. So to really get into a flow state, you want to hit this sweet spot where your skills are aligned with the challenges. And of course, one of the most amazing things about being a human being is that we can always continuously develop our skills and then go after bigger and bigger challenges. So I love to think of flow as a way that helps us grow and be at our best in growing when we can essentially ride this flow channel. And then here was just a recap of the previous chapters. So chapter 1 even gave an introduction to, it was called Happiness Revisited. We were thinking about how flow fits into the scheme of happy experiences. Just briefly, one of the quick ways I like to think about this, something that comes out of positive psychology, and Csikszentmihalyi and his work on flow is often seen as part of the movement of positive psychology. But in positive psychology, Martin Seligman famously has thought of 3 different kinds of happiness. There's a kind of happiness in the moment, there's happiness from engagement, and then there's happiness from deep long-term meaning. And flow kind of straddles all of these, but it's really that middle piece. Flow is all about the happiness that you get from being thoroughly engaged in the task at hand. Then chapter 2 gave us a brief introduction to consciousness. And then if we go on to chapters 3 and 4, unless I don't know if Maritza want to say anything else about those other ones. Chapter 3 was where we really got into the definition of what flow is all about. And I'll just read through some of these because it just gives a great summary of what the flow state is. So for the flow state, you need clear goals, immediate feedback, a balance between challenges and skills. There's the experience that action and awareness seem to merge. Your self-consciousness, sense of self disappears. Time becomes distorted, and the activity itself feels like an end in itself. And then in the previous chapter, we were looking at different conditions of flow and perhaps how we have to grow the complexity of ourselves in order to attain flow experiences. And then that all is getting us to the chapter we are now currently on, where we're really going to go in depth into the body in flow. Anything else you wanted to say about any of our previous chapters, Maritza?
No, I think you covered it all. The one thing I will say is that probably the most important slide there is the one with the graph. I think the graph would summarize just about everything we've touched on so far. So we will continue to keep coming back to that time and time again.
Now let's get into chapter 5, the body in flow. And one sentence that I like from this chapter is this first one that we're opening with, which is that everything the body can do is potentially enjoyable. And I see that MC really gives us a challenge here to think about what are all of our bodily capacities and how can we construct our activities so that we are getting the most enjoyment possible out of the bodily capacities we have. So the first topic that we're looking at here is one that's really getting into, I would summarize this as athletics. And he's talking about these ideas of higher, faster, stronger. So this idea of setting a goal for the body, like to jump higher, to run faster, to work your muscles so that they become stronger. So the idea that if you set a goal, measure progress so that you get immediate feedback, have that full concentration on what your body is doing in the moment, and do this work of continually developing the skills, these are ways that you can get into flow states in athletic activities. But I think it might even be most productive here to open it up to the floor and see if anybody wants to share any thoughts or personal experiences you might have had working on getting higher, faster, or stronger.
I do want to jump in here just 2 seconds and say that it doesn't have to be only in the athletics, usually you think athletes level. There could be something much slower paced, like if you're practicing to strengthen your fingers for learning a new instrument, that's still higher, faster, stronger, just in a slightly different way.
I think that's a great point. And I would hope all of us know that, now in 2021, which might not have been as culturally obvious or fashionable back in 1990, fitness. I think fitness, I believe, is much more of everybody knows about the value of fitness more now, I think, than even people did back then. And hopefully people now think about every person develops a personal fitness practice. And I think, Mehdi, to your point is well taken, that it's not necessarily about being an athlete, but just thinking about your own current level of fitness and what you can do to improve and become stronger, get faster, reach higher. So would anybody like to share any of their experiences or thoughts about this particular topic? You can type exclamation point in the chapter or in the chat function, or you can just use the raise the hand button as well, and we can bring you up to the floor to share. So Michael wants to go first.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Sorry, I was just eating dinner before and I like really hot peppers. I hope I can make it through this conversation.
Well, you're going to have a lot to say then when we get to the last one, which is all about food.
Yeah, so my body is in flow, to say the least. I think you made a very good point earlier about people not having to be professional athletes to start learning to enjoy their body physically. Even if you're by yourself, say you're a tennis fan only on TV, and you feel for whatever reason you're not going to be able to play tennis, but you can go behind a supermarket parking lot and take a tennis ball and a racket and just very lightly hit it against the wall until you get it back, and then maybe start like a personal record. I can hit it 5 times in a row before I miss a certain mark, and just continue that. I think they even talked about that in the book, about setting a personal record. It doesn't have to be a personal record that's being broadcast on ESPN. Any physical endeavor, getting on a bicycle and just timing it, if you have a Fitbit or anything, and you don't need to be in great shape. It can just be any incremental step that is forward as opposed to where you were yesterday. Nobody even has to know that you're doing it. But it's even better if you have a friend who's anywhere near your level at whatever sport you're trying to do. Even walking, have a friend, a walk buddy, and just say, look, we're gonna walk a mile in X amount of time, and let's see if we can just do it 30 seconds better the next day. And that makes it even better. So I thought that was a really good point you made in the book.
I absolutely agree. Dave, and then Dennis next.
Yeah, my comment was about sensory. Is that coming up in a different section?
Yes, it will be. We're gonna go through each of the different topics in order.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Dennis.
As far as I can remember, I've only experienced flow once, and that's one time when I was playing squash. For those of you who may not know squash, it's basically a court game. If you've played racquetball, it's similar to that, except it can be a little bit faster. So one time when I was in a tournament, I could do absolutely no wrong. Everything went fine. That's the only time I've ever experienced flow physically. I may have experienced it mentally a few times, but I can talk about that a little bit later.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing. Max is up next.
Hello, my name is Max. Yes, there are 2 things that I thought were interesting. One, in terms of doing physical activity and really get into a flow of sort of, I like to run and go for sort of longer runs, let's say, not so long, but 5 miles maybe minimum or so. And it doesn't happen always, but it does happen often enough that I hit a certain rhythm, and it doesn't even have to be a self-challenge at all. It's just something kicks in where all of a sudden it's really no longer a workout, and it's really a very pleasant bodily experience of either listening to podcasts and running or listening to music and running. And it just, the miles just come by themselves, let's say. So that's on the one side, I can see that for myself. On the other side, something else he mentioned, and I don't know if it's in this chapter or if it's in the previous chapters, he was talking about when you get sort of addicted to that a little bit and you start maybe overusing it and using it for the wrong purposes, let's say. And I have certainly done that with the exercise as well. So I thought that was interesting highlight of the point, because I haven't really, I mean, I knew sometimes I just did something, but I didn't really want to do it. And it wasn't that great of an experience anyhow, including running. So yeah, anyway, that's all.
Thank you. Those are two great points, I believe. And there's the phrase "in the zone," which runners often use, which I think is pretty much a synonym for flow states. And then you're right, too, just being aware of, sometimes it's called the dark side of flow, the potential dangers when we use flow as a kind of addiction to be aware of. Next, it looks like we have another Michael S.
Yeah. Yes, I'm a
Welcome.
long time. Hi, Michael Silén from Sweden. I'm a long time explorer of flow states. I didn't know it from the beginning, but I certainly experiment with all kinds of various flow states. I've always been a dreamer, so I can zone out and go into my things like that. And also, since I started dancing and raving when I was 16, I went into this type deep flow states when some people describe it as a waterfall. You get the waterfall moment when it starts on your head and then it flows down all your body. So I experiment like from low energy flow states when you just sit dwelling deep into a subject, reading, playing board games, playing computer games, and then like the next step up is when you do exercises to the gym and you're almost there. But then when you go raving and you go into this deep flow, I can rave for hours without taking any substance, without feeling any fatigue, just this deep trance thing. And that's that's something I thought everyone could, but apparently not. But so I've explored everything around flow states, both the low energy and the high energy. And for me, since I got my Apple Watch and pulse meter, I know that around 80% of my max pulse, I go into the deep energy flow states. I have to come up in pulse for that to happen as well. So, and then if I go really high, I can go like up to 90% of my max pulse when I'm at the gym. But for the rave sessions, I lie constantly around 80% when I rave for hours and things like that. And I'm 48, and I haven't been out clubbing for almost 2 years now. But before that, when I was 46, I could still do it for 5 hours straight. So that's my experience. Yeah.
I think dancing is a great example. And we're even going to even come more to dancing. And you make some great points too, amazing tools that we have available now that certainly were not available in 1990 that allow us to track our body in this way and learn more things about our own flow states. Next up is Julie.
I have a question, and it would be, do you think that, or have they done studies on people that are living on purpose? Are they easily in a flow state? And that's one reason why it's their purpose? Because I tend to think that the self-forgetting makes you able to be the self-consciousness and the fear is what gets in the way. So if you're engaged in something that's so enjoyable to you, then that could happen easily.
Right. I don't believe it came up in this chapter, but definitely purpose is one of the, you can almost think of it as the kind of preconditions of flow that is identified. And I believe we are going to talk about that more in a later chapter.
Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Anything more about higher, faster, stronger, or we'll go on to the next topic? You want to say something, Maritza?
Yes, two quick comments I want to make here before we move on. Another thing that I found really interesting about this section is the concept of people being happiest when just talking to one another. And I don't know about the rest of you, but, and okay, this is in the before times, right? Before COVID, I used to have one of my absolute favorite things in the world to do is to have one or two of my friends show up and we'll hang out. Usually I make a supper, but then the best part comes after. You know, when you sit down on the sofa and you just start talking, you might crack a bottle of wine and you're just chatting. And it's like, it's not that late. It's like maybe 9 p.m. And then before you know it, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, because it seems like time has just like disappeared and ceased to exist, because you got so caught up on your philosophical discussions that you failed to notice the passage of time. To me, I would consider that like a soft form of a flow state as well. And I think that that is covered here when discussing the higher, faster, stronger. It's technically not quite the body and flow. We'll probably cover it a little bit more in the next chapter, but it's, even when you're sitting there, all your aches and pains kind of fall away because you get caught up in the conversation. So that's how I would reconcile it in this section here, which is what they're talking about for people being happy and happiest when doing something not expensive that causes them to enter in some type of a flow state.
Good point. You're right that it doesn't exactly fit under the topic of higher, faster, stronger, but he does bring up this point about how we don't necessarily need the expensive gadgets. So I guess this is the nuance on the point of, especially from the 2021 perspective, that there are some amazing tools and gadgets that often are admittedly and understandably expensive because they are technological marvels, and they can help us track our bodies and help us measure our bodily states and give us feedback about flow states. And this other equally important point that some of the most easily available flow experiences don't require expensive gadgets at all. You even brought up, I think, in the slide that he gives examples such as gardening or knitting. I think these are examples where there's certainly hands-on tasks, or in addition to just being in conversation with a good friend. And all of these are other examples of activities that can definitely get us into flow.
Right. I think he wasn't quite sure where section to put it in, because I feel like he threw it in as an aside. But honestly, I felt like that was really important for those of us who aren't athletes. And, the idea of running in the morning is like, yeah, I'd rather chew my arm off. But that's still, there are ways like garden. Fun fact, there is actually research that shows that when you're playing, I call it playing, right? When you're playing in the garden and you're tilling the soil and you're pulling up weeds or planting things, there is some type of a microorganism that is released from the dirt that goes straight to your brain and affects different serotonin levels. So it is doing something to you, in addition to entering you into some type of a low flow state. I like the way Michael stated it. He says low energy flow state. I really do like that. All right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
It looks like Max has one more thing to say about this one, and then we'll go into movement. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I talked on top of you. Yeah, something to build on Maritza's comment. This doesn't happen often to me, but it does happen. And we're talking about household stuff. I mean, I can get into a house cleaning routine, okay? It doesn't happen often, but it does happen, where if I have the right thing playing in my ears, or maybe I'm in the right mood and things are good, I'm not sure. But typically I don't like to do it. But sometimes I am in the flow, and it's like I'm enjoying how things are coming out, and it's not really a chore on that day, and I'm sort of proud how things look. And again, it doesn't happen often at all, it happens very rarely, but it does happen. So to sort of just build, it doesn't have to be something strenuous, I guess, from that perspective.
Exactly. So I think we're going to get into this in a little more detail, but flow experiences cover a wide range. And one of the flow triggers we know are risk and high consequences. So there's definitely a way in which these very strenuous physical activities, the big ones are skiing, skydiving, snowboarding. All of these extreme sports are definitely things that can get you into flow states. But they are not the only things that can get you into flow states. And there are certainly, you might think of them as calmer activities. in the next session, 2 weeks from today, we're even going to talk about flow and thought. So you can absolutely get into a flow state just sitting still and reading a book. And I love how you guys are pointing out all these other kinds of physical activities that aren't so intense, but can definitely get you into flow. And Maritza, I think the very fact that you use the word play already suggests exactly how we're getting into flow. The fact that it feels like play, that's already, I think, a signal that you know you're getting into flow. And I believe that takes us nicely into the next topic, which is about, as he calls it here, the joys of movement. And so here we're looking at movement in a very kind of broad range of what movement could be. And there was a great line here that's on the slide where, as long as we're concentrating on what we're doing and making finer and finer distinctions in the challenges involved in the activity, we can find flow from all kinds of movements. Maritza, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add on this topic.
I feel like most of this we already covered, so I'm just gonna leave the rest to you and anyone else who might want to make a comment.
So I see Julie mentioned music, and we're going to get to music for sure. But that is a great example. Yeah, this one I think is like the catch-all topic as well too, which one of my other little pet peeves with this chapter perhaps is there's so many great topics to think about the body and flow. I'm not quite sure that MC organized this in the most useful way of going through it either. I personally would have put this one in the end so that it could just be the catch-all for, hey, here's everything else about movement and bodily activity that we didn't get a chance to talk about, but I didn't write the chapter. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, next we are going to get to music, but next we have another big topic to get into, which is sex as flow. And here there was a lot that MC had said, which this is particularly a chapter where I feel just even in our understanding of goodness, like sociology and anthropology, let alone culture, that we understand a lot more about possibilities for sex. So this could be the interesting part of the show today. But if anybody perhaps wanted to share any thoughts about how sex can be a flow experience. I'll share that. To me, one of the most significant aspects of this topic that definitely resonated with me was the focus on sensuality and bringing in aspects of ritual and emotion in that way so that you are really just fully absorbed and involved in that moment and what is happening. That's just me.
I'd like to share with you what I shared with Joya just a little bit earlier when we were discussing this chapter. In the book itself, for those of you who have read the book, so MC does talk about some ideas about, how staid and old, sex or romance can get. And I feel like that's kind of the age of the book is showing a little bit, in that there is we have more of a modern view today of how pleasure can be found in so many things. I suspect that his view of sex was slightly more limited, and perhaps when he was thinking how to keep it fresh might have been a slightly, more challenge. But I do love the last bullet here on this slide. How to keep love fresh. The answer is the same as it is for any activity. And I think that that's very true. As we build complexity for any of our relationships, whether they be person to person relationships, person to inanimate object, our physical relation to our emotional relationship, any type of interaction, if we build complexity, we will keep it fresh, keep it interesting, and that puts us on that forward moving path that we see in that chart that we showed for you at the very beginning of today, where we see that it helps us stay in the middle, the green, the flow path, which I think that's ultimately where it is. It's again, how it looks for you will definitely be different for how it looks from the rest of us. But as long as we're moving forward, constantly seeking some type of improvement and increasing complexity, we'll get there, even in this type of a maybe slightly different relationship than we would assume we were talking about when considering flow. Okay, I have.
I think. Sorry. I want to just say something there too. I think this is a wonderful point that throughout the book we've seen that MC stresses the idea of growth of the self and growing the complexity of the self. And personally, from my experience, I would say that to really live a fulfilling, flourishing human life, you want to also have deep relationships that themselves grow in complexity. And there's, I think, even a kind of integration or kind of spiral with this, that ideally you are growing as a self, and then you're in relationship with a partner who is also growing, and then the relationship itself is growing. And that when we are continually growing in complexity, this is what leads to happiness, especially over the long term. Looks like Michael A, who wants to jump in and say something on the sexes flow topic.
Wait, we had Max and then
sorry.
Michael, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Max. Okay, I'm sorry. Max first and then Michael A.
No, you both, Joya and Maritza, covered it. Basically, I had the same takeaway. It's, and I mean, it's true, right? You have to keep things fresh and change things up, whether it's sex or whether it's riding a bike or walking in the park or running. Getting new routes is nice, right? I mean, I can speak for myself that it is nice, even if when you like ride a bike, for example. So that, I think that's the chapter where he talked about it, but it's all applicable, like you guys already mentioned, everywhere else. That's all I want to say. So you already covered it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Max. And then Michael A.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about a point he made in the book about people's first love. He talked about and how powerful that is, your first kiss, your first romance, the first time you make love with somebody. Like, those are such powerful experiences that I've known people personally that I think spent the rest of their lives trying to recreate that. Like they seem to jump from relationship to relationship because they love that initial spark. And then the second they realize they can't really recreate, I don't know if anybody else has known or experienced that, where it's so difficult to kind of bring back those first times that if you try to do it later on in life, it can be a very vicious cycle,
No, that's an excellent point. And I think this then gets into the potential dangers of the dark side of flow. That you're right, that first experience of the first kiss, the first love, the first sexual experience can be so intense. And then we're just chasing that like another addictive substance. And hopefully this idea of thinking about sex as flow and relationships as flow and thinking about how to grow in complexity, hopefully that's a way to mitigate this potential dark side, I would hope. Right. Anyone else wants to say anything about the sexiest of the topics? All right. So then next we're going to go on to yoga and the martial arts as the ultimate control. And here I figured we're definitely going to call on Michael A, because I know he has plenty of expert things that he can talk about the martial arts much more than I can. And I actually do practice yoga, so I can say a few things about that particular topic. And if anybody else also does yoga and martial arts and wants to jump in here, they can go ahead. But I'm going to totally put Michael A on the spot and have him talk to us about martial arts and control.
Yeah, I studied Taekwondo for a fairly long time. And was very fortunate to have a young Taekwondo master who's just, he had so much wisdom. And he taught a lot about getting your mind to disappear. If you've seen the movie The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, if you've ever seen the movie, you know, he gets kind of captured by the samurai. He was fighting against them, and then he becomes friends with the person who was kind of running the place there. And then they started to teach him some of the fighting technique. And at one point, one of the villagers came up to him and said, "Your mind's in the way, like you have to lose your mind." So in Taekwondo or karate and so many of the martial arts, they have forms that you have to repeat, and they're beautiful. If you watch them in motion, they look like ballerinas, that these beautiful movements that are combined with sudden strikes and yells and kicks. So it's a nice combination of beauty, flowing movement, and then very powerful strikes. When you learn those forms, you're tested on them. And what happens very often, you're in front of a grandmaster or a master on the mat. And when you start to do your form, if you're self-conscious, your flow is completely gone. I like to say the opposite of flow is wolf. If you turn the word around, I used to joke with myself and say, avoid the wolf and turn it into flow. Because if you spell it backwards, it spells wolf. And I remember so many times being testing and doing something and realizing that my mind was in the way. And the more that he trained me to kind of separate your thoughts and just get it to the point where everything becomes rote, that you realize that you're doing the routine. And let's say it took you, I don't know, 2 minutes to execute it from start to finish. There is no time anymore, which is something else that he talked about in the book. It just completely disappears. I guess, Max, you must feel the same when you run. You know, if you're getting that runner's high in the middle of a 5-mile run, and next thing you know, you're done and you're taking your shoes off and you feel great and you go, wow, where did those 5 miles go? The same thing happened on the mat as a martial artist, that when it did happen, you would complete the whole form and not even realize that you had done it. And then the other thing would be when you're actually sparring with people at the beginning, it's very off-putting, because there's somebody in front of you who you know is technically not really going to hit you, but they are throwing punches and kicks. And then after a while, you start to realize that time is slowing. And as you and your partner are working through even some of the pre-programmed sparring, that you're in no danger at all, because everything seems to be coming at you slow. And it's almost like there's a dance between you and your sparring partner. But that does not happen at the beginning, and it certainly doesn't happen all the time. But I think that's the goal of a lot of martial artists, is to kind of shrink everything to the point where you're just executing what you're doing without really thinking about it. The mind and body connect, and that's the ultimate goal. I guess the practical standpoint would be, if you were ever confronted on the street, that you would be able to bring yourself back to your mat and be able to confront somebody with the same clear mindset, which is very difficult to do if you're not used to that. If somebody's approaching you violently on the street and you're not used to dealing with that at all, you'll probably panic and feel very uncoordinated. So that's the long-term goal, is to just be able to keep your focus through all that. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
I think that's just a beautiful description of what it is to be in flow. You pointed out the two sides of how time gets distorted, how on the one hand, time seems to speed up, and then in another sense, it also seems to slow down. And part of what the value of flow is, I think, is how flow is associated with peak performance, and what we were talking about, the challenge skills balance. So I'm sure when you're first starting out in martial arts, when you're first learning a new form, then you are in the challenge where it's difficult, it's a struggle, that, you know, if anything, it's anxiety focusing. You have to use your conscious mind, and you have to struggle, and you don't get into flow, but you work on your skills until the skills can become automated, till it goes back into the subconscious, and then you don't have to be focused on the particular activities. You can just execute, and the sense of self just disappears. So that's just a perfect example, I believe, of what flow is all about. Let's see. And so now if anybody else wants to say anything about martial arts and or yoga, it looks like Max is up next.
Yeah, thank you. And Michael, I don't know, because I've never done anything like that, but I thought it was interesting in the book. I think that's in that section, he talked about how the East versus West approach martial arts differently, in that the East will focus on conscious control of the body and really get into that sort of flow, as opposed to West being really, I guess, physical, material sort of training oriented. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that or not.
Yeah, that is spot on, Max, because there's I guess a pejorative term here in the States anyway. It's called buying the belt. You'll have a lot of young kids who start martial arts, and these martial artists have to make livings. They have dojangs or dojos, and they have people coming in to train. But a lot of the West, it's about sometimes it's even to put it on your resume that you want to get into a college, that I have a black belt in Taekwondo or karate. And sometimes to get that belt, you just need to show up and pay the testing fees, etc. Where traditionally the black belt, I don't know if it's folklore or not, but it makes a lot of sense. There was no such thing as a colored belt, supposedly. All martial artists just wore a white belt to keep whatever uniform they had on. It became black over time because you're not allowed to wash them. So that is the theory behind it. So from the East, to your point, Max, the master who was training me was from Korea. Taekwondo is a Korean art. Everything he did, everything he talked about was from the mindset of inner control. He just happened to be really good physically, but that is a perfect analogy. In the West, we're concerned with how fast does it take to get the black belt, where on the East, it's like, just keep coming back every day and your belt will eventually turn black. So that was a very good point.
I love that anecdote. I never heard that before, that the belt just turns black from all of the work and the use of it. That's
I don't know.
Even if that's not true, it's a great story.
I never really know. It's just thing I've heard from more than one person. It kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Well, I'll have to look that one up.
Next up, we have Magical Mike.
Okay, there are many things, both physical and mental, that tie together when there's risk, a consequence, or something that you're stretching beyond yourself, or you seem as extremely worthwhile, but there's a risk of failing. It produces a feeling that conquers all the other feelings and allows you to perform at your best, both physically and mentally. And the statement that I've heard and I felt is, I don't know where my strength came from. I don't know where where everything worked right came from. I don't know where the pain went, because if you're sleep deprived and you're stretching beyond your capabilities, there's pain involved. And if you're running a marathon, you say, I don't think I'll go there. I've had enough. But somehow you have the reserve to make that work. People who've been wired up so they know what their neurochemistry and their brain waves are doing, that you're at an optimal point, and everything's running faster. So that's why the clock that you measure your time against seems to be running a lot slower, because your neurochemistry and electroneural impulses are running faster. And all the five chemicals of the major changes in both amplitude and balance between the five major neurotransmitters that occur when you're involved on a project or a mission that that makes you, that puts you into flow. And if you're not in the flow, you can say, I don't need this, I'll give up. But you can get that extra mile, that extra strength from being in the flow. And there's a number of psychological tricks, some from that book, some from things we've heard here and from other sources that enter into it. The focus and discussion on focus that we've had a while back also plays into that. I think, Michael, you did that on between chess and the stock market. You get into the flow when you're working a project of that nature too. So,
Yes.
oh, one more thing I'll add. The guy who invented positive psychology is often credited as Seligman, but their first papers were written together, and they have a book that's written together.
Mhm.
Csikszentmihalyi
Yes.
and Seligman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Magical Mike. And it looks like Max has something to add, and then Maritza has something to say too.
Yeah, actually, Magical Mike, thank you very much. That made me think of something that I didn't think about in the question to all, and I'm sorry if it's the wrong topic and maybe it's discussed further in the book. We can talk about it later too. When you are in a fight or flight state and adrenaline kicks in, you're in an accident, you have to get out of something, or you have to do something extraordinary that you usually wouldn't have power for, and you do it. Mike, I think you just referred to that just a little bit. Is that sort of a, I think it's a question to anybody who has an opinion, or maybe, like I said, it's the wrong topic. When you get that adrenaline and you sort of know what to do and you do it fast and you do the necessary thing, even though under normal circumstances you wouldn't do it, do you think would that be considered flow as well, or no? Does that make sense? My question, does it make sense?
I think it does. And I think we're actually going to get into that. So like after this book, we're going to go, I think the next book we want to tackle in this series on flow is a book that came out just earlier this year in January of 2021, which is Stephen Kotler's book called The Art of the Impossible. And that's the book where he really goes into the latest research that we have on all of the different neurotransmitters that get released in flow. So like Magical Mike was mentioning, there's like the big five, like there's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, anandamide, and endorphins. And so exactly how flow fits into the fight or flight, I think can be, I'm not exactly sure that I think it's in that book really where we would talk about that a little bit more. And I'm not even sure that the data is all settled, but certainly there's a danger, of course, if you're in the fight or flight stage, you could be in that stage where it is just too anxiety provoking, and that's going to prevent you from getting into a flow state. But I'm not exactly sure what the relationship is there between, kind of how all of this fits together, flow and that ability to perform really well. Certainly the cases where there are risks and high consequences, and there is that major challenge, and then you also have the skills to meet it, and it all comes together in that moment, that certainly would be considered a flow state, but I'm not exactly sure how it would fit with all the different examples there. But it looks like Maritza wants to say something next.
Yes. Well, first I'd like to say that's a fascinating question, Max. It might be interesting to hear people's just instant gut feelings on that. Maybe at the end when we do our lightning round, that might be an interesting one to throw back up there, just out of curiosity. Before we go into the official deep dive in the future, I just wanted to. So I'm going to cheat here. I know I said we weren't going strictly by the slides, but I am actually going to direct your attention to the slides for a moment. So I want to talk about yoga for a little bit. So yoga and I have had a love-hate relationship for most of my life, more hate than love, just because. So I have a long history of dancing. I was in several different dance groups, practiced several different forms of dance when I was younger. But as I got older, I increasingly became much less flexible. And ultimately, I ended up realizing that I actually have an autoimmune disease that specifically was targeting my ability to have any kind of flexibility. And so I've never enjoyed yoga. I felt like every time I tried yoga, it was just a reminder of all the restrictions on my body. And so I was always very, very negative and against yoga. But I decided to do a 30-day challenge on it recently, during COVID times, because what else is one going to do when one is home alone and has no cats? And I found that I hated it a little less at the end of 30 days. The fascinating thing is the routine, as you're redoing some of these steps, it's like the body remembers, and you're not needing to focus on ensuring that you're doing, if there's 3 steps to performing this move, it's a kind of like dancing, except I never experienced dancing that way. For me, dancing was far more instinctual. But with the yoga, as the days went by and I'm redoing similar steps, I found that by week 3, my body was eager to slide from one to the next. And that was a very odd sensation. And so looking at these 8 steps here that are described as being the 8 stages in yoga, and they're identified as being, we're attempting, our goal is to maintain control over our consciousness. And I almost feel like these could be applied to so many things. Now, the chapter is a little more verbose on each stage, but what I did was I tried to pull out the one word that identified best in English the word that was presented to us. I think that's Sanskrit, but please don't quote me in the original text there. So, but think about it: restraint, obedience, sitting, breath control, withdrawal, holding on, meditation, and self-collectedness. I feel like that flow of paces for our bodies and our minds, it is most definitely a path for bringing under control our wieldy consciousness. So I think it's a fascinating idea, and I just wanted to put out there that I can see how someone doing a really serious, in-depth study and practice of yoga could find a strength in control over themselves and their consciousness in a way that is not, especially if you tend to be one who really enjoys structure. I can really see it. It's because, like I said, I was certainly a very reluctant practitioner, and I'm still, super beginner. It's not like my absolute favorite thing in the world, but I can't say I hate it anymore. And I can see how the continued practice of it can get me to a point where I would forget time. I would find myself in this very interesting, space where the body is in movement, but the mind is very still, which I think is really fascinating. It's just a fascinating state. And I think that alludes to what it is that MC is trying to show us is our desired goal in just about everything we approach in life. That's it, all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. I'll jump in and comment on that. I have my own relationship with yoga, sometimes a love-hate relationship, although I think it's grown to a little bit more love for sure over the years. Although personally, I really love Pilates. We don't talk about Pilates in this chapter. That would be my favorite fitness and movement activity of choice, but I've also done a lot of yoga. I even taught kids yoga for a while. And this chapter just reminded me, because when we taught yoga to kids, we presented these 8 stages in terms of an octopus. So it was the octopus with all of the different 8 tentacles that all built up into the yoga octopus there. But yoga is so fascinating, and MC even gets into this, pointing out how, along with martial arts like yoga, these traditions go back beyond recorded history in the Eastern traditions. And there's so many different ways to practice yoga. And now that yoga has really had, yoga from the East has really integrated or clashed, or however you want to think about the encounter that yoga has had with the West. Certainly just the word yoga, I think, just means something completely different to our minds in the United States in 2021 than it would have meant back in 1990. But I will share that one of the most powerful lessons that I ever learned about yoga that certainly helped me in my practice, and I think is absolutely in line with what MC is trying to tell us here. I had a teacher who described that what makes a practice yoga, as opposed to just stretching or any other physical activity that you could be doing, that what makes it yoga, that you didn't necessarily need all of the Sanskrit, you didn't necessarily need one of these lineages, but what you did need was a mind and a body connected by the breath. And that what makes it yoga is that as you're doing the asana, is the word for the physical activity, as you're doing the poses, that it's not just the body, but that you, as you're doing the poses, that your breathing and the mind is paying attention through the breath to the body. The breath is that connecting point between mind and body. So it doesn't even have to be the most crazy, intense yoga position. This is, I think, where, to tie it in with what we're talking here with flow, the challenge, skills, balance. If you're someone who, like I was, who had not done any kind of physical activity before I got into yoga, that there was no way I was going to be able to do those intense poses, but that didn't matter, because yoga is not the getting your head behind your knees or some crazy pose. That what really makes it yoga is having that experience of being present in the moment, because your mind is focused on the breath, and then you're focused on, what the breathing is doing to the body. That you've put your body in the pose, and there's a kind of structure that's stable, but the breath is the motion, and then your mind there is then in sync with the motion and with the present moment by focusing on the breath. That's just what I wanted to share about yoga. Well, any last thoughts though from anyone here about martial arts or yoga, or perhaps really anything in what we learn from the Eastern traditions? Or we'll then just go on to the next topic. All right, let's go on to the next one then, which is going to be about flow through the senses. And we start here with the joys of seeing. And I do love this phrase, that for the trained eye, even the most mundane sights can be delightful. Did anybody want to share about how just even paying attention to your sense of sight can give you so much enjoyment in everyday experiences? It looks like Dave has something to get us started with here.
Ooh, yeah, thanks. And this has been an interesting journey, and this about seeing, and I guess we'll get to music later. I've got comments on that too. But to me, I will go for a leisurely walk to get some exercise, usually in the evening, and I'll often look up at the clouds. And sometimes they're just spectacular cloud formations. And I will often even stop and pull out the phone and take a picture. And of course, the other one is sunsets. Depending on what the weather conditions are, the cloud formations and the colors that sometimes will seep into a beautiful sunset, to me are wonderful emotional experiences. Thank you.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Dave.
It is beautifully said. I'm gonna jump in here and gonna use it because I look for every excuse I can to bring up trees. So I'm gonna bring up trees here. So I have almost an unnatural fascination with trees. And I say to many people, and specifically to my nieces and nephews when they were younger, because now they're all grown up. But I often tell them, if ever you happen to find yourself standing underneath a tree, look up. And my reason for telling them this, and when they ask me why, what I've explained is that looking up from under a canopy of tree branches and looking at the leaves, it's somehow, in my mind, I feel that it just forces your mind to stop. Not to stop thinking per se, but to stop bouncing. And you look up and you get a sense of peace. I don't know if it's a matter of a flow state. I just feel like so MC uses the concept of psychic energy. Maybe that's a way of charging one's psychic energy. When he's talking of the joys of seeing, I consider it being a way of, this is a way to recharge. We so many things we do are siphoning the energy from us. This is one that I feel adds to it. And the nature is something that really, in my mind, it's one of the best ways to enjoy a flow through the senses. If one were going to attempt to truly appreciate having the ability to see, I believe it's best done by reintroducing ourselves to nature and to those things which are found to be untouched or soiled by human invention and human interaction, just because it points to something that also lives within us, but we can't necessarily see. And hopefully that makes sense. And so that's what I think of when I think of the joys of seeing and how we could get into any kind of a flow state. I think it just starts with looking up at trees. Thanks, guys.
How did we know Maritza was going to bring trees into this? I have something to say on this one too, but it looks like Jack has something to say and go first.
Yeah, I was just quickly going to say, so I'm reading this book, Moonwalking with Einstein, and essentially it's, well, I won't go through the whole summary of the book, but the part that was, I think it's kind of relevant here is the idea of a memory palace. Maybe some of you guys have learned about that. So the technique is essentially, say you're in a house and you have like a bunch of different rooms, you associate a room with a certain thing that you want to remember. And so essentially what's happening is it's tying into when we were hunter-gatherers, it was important as a part of a survival mechanism to kind of like remember certain locations, or how do you get back home, or like, hunting grounds or gathering berries, different locations. It is important for our survival to remember those things. So essentially the idea of a memory palace is you're associating some abstract idea with a location and like a room in the house, whatever. And so you're able to recall. And so the reason why I bring that up is because we were just talking about, Maritza was just talking about like nature and being in nature. And I think like the way that this relates to flow, and I could talk more about this in the lightning round, but I think that there is something about training and like in terms of seeing the visual, being able to see locations, or whether it's within nature or whatever, that we like, it taps into an aspect of almost like it manifests as intuition. And so the more like, in particular, when he's talking about seeing in this section, I think it's more about, the trained eye or people who are trained to see certain things in paintings or whatever. And that's true. I think like of a lot of these things, it's about developing the skills, right, in order to achieve certain goals or objectives or whatever. So I think that like, and again, like this idea of intuition when a martial artist has gone through the motions so many times that like they don't even have to think about it anymore. Just like, certain things just happen. It's almost like you're an automatic pilot. The subconscious constantly, in a way, kind of takes over the conscious aspect of, of who we are. So anyway, I could talk about this for a while, but I think that there's a connection there between the visual aspect as it relates to locations or within nature, and relates to intuition, relates to flow, and relates to a number of other things.
Thanks for sharing, Jack. And yes, and let's definitely plan to come back to some of these topics when we get to the deep dive questions. But Max has something to say here first.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. That was interesting. Yeah, what I was going to say, yeah, I agree personally, if I can speak for myself, is that nature is recharging and very beautiful. But I also wanted to just say, I also noticed, well, when I used to do a little bit more photography just for fun, I don't anymore, but I used to go, I went a few times to Brooklyn at night. There are a few spots overseen from Manhattan, across from Manhattan, for photography, basically, sort of at night, capture the city scene. And it's not the same as the nature, because from nature, like some of you mentioned, you get that positive charge back of some sort into your body, but it is still, and I don't know if it really relates to this conversation, but you get really an awe, or I do, you don't, I do, I speak for myself, of the city, and being, the city has its own flow with the lights flickering off and on and just reflecting of the river. And you lose or I lose myself in being the small, and the city being so big and being so beautiful from those few spots in Brooklyn, especially with a camera, and really enjoying it. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thanks for mentioning that one, Max. Personally, I absolutely get that same awe experience from looking out at New York City. And for sure, those experiences of awe, they drive our attention into the present moment, and they bring us into flow states. But it looks like Dennis has something to say here next.
What I found is that perhaps similar to what Max has said, is that I find that, at least lately, doing drawings has sharpened my sense of seeing. And it doesn't have to be anything in particular. For example, one recent lesson that we had was simply drawing knots to invoke a feeling of meditation. So for example, you might see something like this, which is obviously very crude, but what you can do is you can almost lose yourself in that for meditation. I don't think that probably counts that much for flow, but just drawing in general will help bring the outside into you. At least that's been my experience recently.
Well, absolutely.
And it's not particularly expensive. It's usually paper, pen, pencil, maybe a few colors. Watercolors are fairly inexpensive. And then a lot of practice.
Absolutely. I hear you saying two things here that I believe are really relevant to flow. One, I think anytime we have these tasks that drive our attention into the present moment, that is what flow is all about. We just completely lose ourselves into the task at hand. And then also, I think what you're saying dovetails with the idea of the challenge skills balance, that if you decide to start practicing drawing and developing your skills, then you're on that path where you're continuously developing the skills and then getting into that flow channel, like the graph that Marisa showed us at the beginning of our presentation here. Max, I think, has something to add on top of what you said here too.
No, I like the drawing, Dennis. I wanted to say that I find myself, and I've done it for the longest, ever since I've worked, often in the meetings, I will draw and doodle, and I'm not absent-minded. I am very focused on what's going on. And I find that's the sort of keeps me focused on the topic at hand while I'm doodling away on my calendar, and my calendar is full of doodles similar to what you just showed.
Perfect example. So I'll just share mine here too really quickly. So for those of you who are in our Saturday discussions where we talk about art, you may have heard that I absolutely love the arts, and my background though in the arts is more in terms of literature and music. So I was never that much aware of the visual arts. But at one point in my life, I was dating someone who was a photographer and an illustrator, and that relationship did not last. But from it, I did learn such a valuable, I think of it as a life skill that I have taken with me forever. And I always say that that boyfriend taught me to see. And one of the most valuable lessons that he gave me about the visual arts was to always pay attention to the play of light and shadow. And it was amazing to me just when I finally stopped to recognize that, to see how changing the light, how even just if you're in one spot and the sun is changing, how the visual landscape around you changes, even though all the objects remain the same, but because of that play of light and shadow, that ultimately the visual experience is different. And it's just something that I've taken and tried to bring to my everyday life, just to take those moments to stop and pay attention to how are the light and shadow playing in this moment. And then it can change, especially when you're outdoors, when there's sunshine, when there is that variability. And I love to do things. Dave was talking about appreciating the sunsets. That's absolutely one of mine. My husband and I, we've made a point to live close to the beach, and I love to be able to just go out to the beach every time. So there again, it's the same spot, it's the same location, but the sunset is different every day. And to just be there, be in the moment, pay attention to what are the different colors, pay attention to how it changes as the sun sets. Again, for me, it's one of those activities that just drives awareness into the present moment and brings those experiences of awe and appreciation and beauty. And I believe that definitely counts as a flow state. Let's then go to the next slide we've got here though, because we've got a whole bunch of senses to get into. And I know people definitely want to talk about this next one, which is the flow of music. And this is a great quote here at the top. It's one of my favorites here, that it is not the hearing that improves life, it is the listening. But I will open this up to anyone who wants to get us started on thinking about music in particular, and perhaps just sound in general, and about listening. So Dave, I think, has something to say on this one as well.
Yeah, thanks. It's taken a while to get here, but yeah, I'm an amateur musician, so I really picked up on this section. I noticed the comments about the rock concert, which I know I'm aged, but I've gone to many, and I would equate it to a feedback loop. I guess it was the OODA loop we've got into in 52 Living Ideas, but you know, the group is playing at the top of their game, and the audience reacts and cheers and applauds, and it seemed like, yeah, that encourages the group to do even more. And you know, they never play exactly like it is on, you know, the record in those days, or the CD or whatever. It's always fresh and new, and they may play some new stuff that they haven't recorded yet. But yeah, to me, it's a grand experience. The other thing was, I would disagree a little bit. They talked about listening to music and listening to two different groups performing the same piece of music. And that kind of puzzled me because I'd never done that. It seemed like it was very analytical, that, listen to the trombones of this group versus the trombones of that group. To me, I'm just listening to the experience, to the music. And to me, getting back to seeing, to me, it would be like going up to a piece of artwork, your nose right in it and looking at brush strokes. Okay, you can do that, but to me, I want to stand back 5 or 6 feet and get the whole experience. So I disagree with that thing about being so analytical. And the other thing I would relate is, as a musician, I get a piece of music put in front of me, which is a bunch of notes on the staff, and I have no idea what it's going to sound like. And the first few times through it, it's kind of rusty and kind of rough. And especially this new contemporary stuff that I have a conductor that puts in front of me. But it's interesting, as you get close to the concert, you start thinking, this is starting to sound like music. And it's a wonderful feeling when it comes together. Anyway, that's my 2 bits. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Dave. Next up is Magical Mike.
When you're performing a piece, which, and I haven't played anything in my misspent childhood, you don't know what your fingers are doing. You don't even know what your mind is doing. Everything knows how to move, and that's kind of like flow. It's sort of like sometimes you're driving home and you don't remember making the turn, but suddenly you come into your driveway. And so that's kind of flow. There's a story which I think is true, that one of the violin maestros, Itzhak Perlman, he was stricken by polio as a child, and he could barely walk, but he became he reinforced his child prodigy status and continued into a musical career. One time he was in a concert hall with for some sort of major concert, and one of the strings on his violin broke, and he was kind of automatically able to improvise. So the people in the audience didn't know that had happened. It was still a masterpiece. What's more important is, until he looked at the replay of the film, he didn't know it had happened. He was, I assume he was really in flow and on autopilot, and that worked exactly the way it should have worked.
That's a marvelous story of being so absorbed in the task at hand that you don't even realize that you've lost the string. Looks like Dennis has something to share with us on this topic next.
Dave, talking about analytic listening made me think of an analog to syntopical reading, where you gather a series of books together and you compare them to one another. And I don't think that I'm particularly musical, except for that I like it. So, for example, I have a couple of different collections by different groups for the Beethoven string quartets. And I wouldn't say that I'm good enough to be able to pick out which group, depending on what I'm listening to, but I think that there are differences.
Thank you. Julie has something to say. Julie,
Sorry,
you're on
I'm
mute
here.
there. Yeah.
I'm here.
I attended the first, I think it was the first meeting on Saturday about art. And I'm not a visual, I think everyone's got different modalities that move them, maybe by genetics, but I have music in my family and I never followed that calling, but music is what moves me and I fall asleep during art history. But the exciting thing for me is I've been exploring classical music at this late age in life as I jog, and I could feel the sound healing my brain. I could hear it, and I'm kind of obsessed with why I like certain things. And what is really exciting to me is that we actually are very practice visually at recognizing and distinctions and things like that. So our hearing is not as developed as our visual in general, but there are actually 4 times as many distinctions, octaves, or orally through hearing than there are visually. Would we know that? Would we notice that? I guess if we practiced and so it's really exciting that I will be appreciating the music more than I am already. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Julian. I can even hear music in the background where you are. That's just absolutely perfect. I'll say this topic was really interesting to me this week because for those of you who were there this past Saturday for the Louis Sullivan meetup, we were exploring his experience with music and to get to what Dave was talking about here, this perhaps dichotomy between the emotional experience of music and the analytical experience of music. And I was thinking about this and I was even analogizing it to my experience of literature, which I think is, as Julie was mentioning, we all have perhaps our favorite art forms that we gravitate toward. And for me, literature is the big one. Music is next, but literature is the first one. And I realized for me that when literature and music too has the greatest impact on me, there is this cyclical kind of pattern where first it absolutely has to start at the emotional level. It has to start, I believe Dave put it beautifully, that you're just there and in the moment and experiencing what happens, and it happens at this kind of intuitive emotional way. Then once I had that experience, I love to go back to the book, the piece of music, and go through the analysis and really pay attention to the craft and think about what are all the different components, what are all the different modalities, perhaps as Julie suggested, to go through that more intellectual exercise of really breaking it down into its components and focusing on, every book starts with the blank page. And I guess you could say every music begins with a piece of silence and then it gets filled. And everything that gets included is a choice. So to start to pay attention to what were the choices that the artist made and what each and every choice adds to the ultimate experience. And then I can go through that analytical period, absorb that, and then come back to the work again and do it as Dave suggested by just having that in the moment experiential, emotional experience. And then it can be so much deeper. And to tie that back into flow, I think it really is this idea again of the flow channel, that analytical stage could think about as being the challenges, as being developing the skills. That's the conscious mind having to work. But then you can automatize that. It goes into the subconscious, and then you can come back to that experience again and have that just in the moment emotional, fully absorbed in the task at hand experience, but have it be so much richer because you did this analytical work. At least that's my experience. Marisa, did you want to say anything else here about music or anybody else? Or should we go to the next topic?
I think that you have summed it up so nicely. In the interest of time, I'm just going to move on to the next slide.
All right. And so here we're finally at the last one. And I have to say, I do feel a little bit like MC kind of cheated us out because we all know that we have 5 senses and we totally missed some of my favorites, which are the sense of touch for me is the most important sense for me. And we didn't even get to talk about what it is to be in the moment with touch. But this is another sense that it's definitely one of the daily highlights and sources of pleasure in my life, which is the joys of tasting and the joy of eating. But I will open it up to the floor first if anybody wants to talk about reveling in the culinary delights.
I will jump in here while folks are gathering their thoughts. Um, I find that different cultures view food differently, and I had an interesting conversation where I had two friends a couple weeks ago actually say to me that they view food as just sustenance, like something they eat just because they have to, and I almost wanted to gasp, like, oh, it's blasphemous. Like there's something about, like, for me, I get almost as much enjoyment, if not more, in the food preparation that I do in the eating of the food. I enjoy the culinary experience of tasting all the various range of food one can find in other cultures and different people's methods of preparation. But there's also just something about the personal exploration and experimentation with one's own culinary choices. Like for cooking, I enjoy experiments, and so I myself am not a vegan, but I can cook vegan food at various different levels. I know what things to substitute to make it this or that, and there's something about considering the kind of analytical details, like, I need this to be more moist, so I have to find this. What is the appropriate binder? What am I substituting? So those types of things can be, it's really so satisfying. And in the preparation of creating that type of a dish, it can just become an all-consuming thing. Or even just creating a meal, like occasionally I'll have like a dinner party, and I do enjoy doing the whole thing from the very beginning through the end. And I find that there is enjoyment, just simple pleasure in so many of the different aspects, like the preparation. When you're peeling the garlic, you can kind of get in the zone there. When you're preparing all the vegetables, or when you're doing this, it's like all the little things you can hyper focus on, because it's very soothing, it's very routine, especially if it's a meal that one is familiar with. Like if I'm cooking like a Spanish holiday dinner, at this point, is something I've done for many, many years. So it's not going to tax my brain in the same way that creating a new recipe for muffins that are vegan will. But both of them will provide for me a sense of enjoyment and pleasure, both in the making and in the tasting of the dish. I know that MC doesn't speak as much about the making of the meal, because he's focusing on the actual sense of taste. But I would put out there that, the way to know if your food is good is through tasting it as you go through cooking it. So you must engage your senses there. You also engage in your sense of smell. I don't know how many of you can just smell by the scent of your broth or your stew, whether or not it needs a little bit more coconuts or a little bit of anything. So you are engaging more than just the sense of taste there. And I can see how it's a way to just be in the moment. Like, it's a very small, simple way of just being in the moment, which slightly different, but similar to that, the comical experience that we all see so often, like of, the slice of chocolate cake in front of you, and you cut into that and you take a bite and you're like, oh my, and you have this thought that this is better than sex. And when, so that thought there I don't think that's the only way you can find it in food. You can find it, at least I'm of the belief that you can find that same moment that forces you to close your eyes and focus purely on the taste of that one morsel for the simple pleasure of feeling it on your tongue. I think you can get that as you're cooking. You can get that as you're serving. Like for me, I love to watch other people go ahead and enjoy something I've prepared for them. So that's kind of the way I see that you can use taste, or even just trying different things. I have a bad habit of being out and tasting different weeds. Probably in the city, it's not the brightest of ideas because of pesticides. But if I find myself in a garden and I'm reasonably certain that it's not going to be, full of pesticides, I do taste different plants, and probably about 50% of the time they taste terrible. But it gives you an idea. It's just a pleasure of, it's another sensory experience that forces you to be right there in the moment. So yes, I just wanted to share those few thoughts. And feel free, please go ahead and type an exclamation if you would like to comment on the joys of tasting.
Thanks, Maritza. Now I definitely want some chocolate cake because of you. But I would absolutely agree with a lot of these points that you're making. First, even just the idea that different cultures approach food differently. This is definitely part of my own personal experience. So I'm part Italian, and I've always said that it was my Italian grandfather who taught me how to eat. And there's something very true about that. I believe I have been a foodie pretty much my entire life. There's this cute story from when I was way back in nursery school or kindergarten, and we're doing one of these assignments where they asked the kids to draw what's your favorite food, and then the teacher was going to write it out so you would learn how to spell the words. And you ask most 4 and 5 year olds what do they like, and it's especially here in the US, it's probably things, I don't know, like cake or pizza or cookies. And little Joya came out with, she loved gnocchi, which is a special Italian pasta. And my poor kindergarten teacher had no idea how to spell my favorite food word. And now as an adult, I am happily married to a chef, and I can definitely attest to it. It definitely makes life enjoyable and exciting every day. So today he's always coming up with just different food projects. So our one today, we were able to pick some beach plums. Our neighbor has a whole bunch of beach plum bushes and more plums than they could ever eat. So they allowed us to pick a whole bunch of beach plums. So we were experimenting with making some beach plum jam. And while my husband is definitely the chef, I'm the one who's in charge of baking in our house, which it's one of those things I actually have to try to not do so much, because otherwise it would just be a problem if I baked as often as I could. But definitely life is short, and there's certainly times when it's great to do baking. And Marisa, to your point about flow, being in the moment of preparing the food, that's definitely something I've experienced. My favorite time to bake, I'm also definitely a night person, and my favorite time to bake is right around midnight when it's cool out, so you don't even mind having the oven on, it's quiet, everyone else is in bed, and you can just really be there in the moment. Sometimes I even make the recipes slightly more difficult, I guess you could say, but more hands-on. So I love making pie crust from scratch. And technically in our modern era, you're just supposed to put all the ingredients in the food processor on. It only takes 2 seconds, but I absolutely love to do it by hand. I guess even getting back to the joys of the sense of touch that we haven't yet talked about here in this chapter. But for me, there's just something about being in the moment where you have all of the smells and then all of the tactile sensation of making the food. And I find too, there's also something when you are the person creating the recipes and you start thinking about experimenting with the recipes, trying things differently. And again, it just gives you more appreciation for the different elements involved. It gives you that appreciation for all the different finer distinctions and allows you to develop complexity with your sense of taste. All right, next up though, we have JP to say something here.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, perfect, loud and
Okay.
clear. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Thanks. I just, from just what you discussed about the food, I'm kind of have two threads that seem incompatible, and I'll just put it out there and I'll try to make it sound coherent. So initially, it seems by getting in the flow, there's kind of and you're discussing martial arts and yoga, there's a mental training involved that's not unlike like meditation and kind of the path to enlightenment kind of thing. And I don't know if you're kind of going in that direction where the flow state is kind of on that same path of enlightenment, what the Buddhists would call enlightenment. So that's kind of one path. And now you're talking about a flow state, eating food, preparing food, whatever. And in Buddhist terminology, that would be considered more of an attachment, a craving, which is antagonistic to this path to enlightenment. So by a flow state, you're kind of releasing cravings, releasing aversions, and you attain that mental state, which might be analogous to flow or whatever. But now you're saying, these pleasures, maybe intense pleasures, music or whatever. And again, it leads to a short-term pleasure, which leads to, again, a Buddhist would say dissatisfaction because it's temporary, it's everything's impermanent, and that would remind you of that, which would lead to, again, this ongoing unhappiness. And so I'm just wondering if I'm going off on a wrong tangent there, or is there some way you can take those two threads together and make them dovetail together, or I'm just totally off on this completely?
Oh, thank you. I think that's an excellent question. And from what I hear, I think you're pointing out the ways in which this idea of flow has similarities to Buddhist practices and then also significant differences. So the way I understand it, flow is all about this experience of being completely present and where your attention is absorbed in the task at hand. And that can be, for flow, both of these things, whereas perhaps for Buddhism, it's only one or the other. So that could be experiences of mindfulness, where you are mindfully aware of what is happening in the present moment. And there is certainly something in the flow experience where we talk about how you perhaps lose a sense of self-consciousness, and perhaps that is in alignment with what happens in Buddhist practice as well. And for flow, and certainly what's been coming out in this chapter, that MC is also recognizing that you can be totally absorbed in the task at hand when you are attending to the pleasures of the body. So when you are attending to the joys of sex, the joys of food, the joys of the beautiful sunset, and perhaps, and I think he would point out that that we would have to be careful that these don't become addictions, but the flow would at least see that you can have a healthy way, perhaps, of still being attentive of the joys of the present moment through reveling in the senses in a way that would be distinct from Buddhist belief and practice. Let me see. So next up, I don't know if people have more to say on this topic, but it looks like Michael has something to say, and then Jack as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on JP's comment. So I understand the attachment and the danger of looking at food and cuisine as like a fleeting thought or just activity where you're just almost eating mindlessly, enjoying the food, and then you're on, and then you're just so attached to this loop that you have. But I grew up in a very, very close-knit Italian family where food and an event like Christmas, it was a 2 or 3 day event where the food, there was so much time and preparation that went into preparing the food, and the songs that my aunts and grandparents sang in the kitchen, that everything kind of came together for me as a kid, where it became an event that I wanted to be attached to. And I found that personally with food, if it was only me, I live alone most of the time, and I can see myself falling into the trap where I'm almost eating something mindlessly. And it's completely opposite to what it was like for me growing up in that family around the holidays. I don't know if I'm making the distinction clear enough between the two.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. Jack has something to say on this as well, I believe.
Yeah. So, well, first, yeah. So it's interesting that JP brought that up, because as I was reading this section, I was thinking the same thing about Buddhism and the idea of craving and suffering. And I just wanted to quote a couple of lines, you know, that he has on page 115, looks like second paragraph. So he says, the other danger in becoming involved with culinary delights, and here again, the parallels with sex are obvious, is that they can become addictive. And then further along in that paragraph, he says, the Puritans' mistrust of enjoyment is grounded in the reasonable fear and given a taste of what that are genetically they are genetically programmed to desire, people will want more of it. So when he says more of it, I'm thinking sugar, well, and salt and, you know, other things. And that's a chemical thing. Anyway, just to continue, he says, and will take away from necessary routines of everyday life in order to satisfy their craving. And so he specifically talks about craving. And, you know, again, as soon as I saw that word, it just like kicked off the whole idea, like what the Buddhists say in terms of craving essentially equals suffering, especially when there's attachment, et cetera, et cetera. But I just wanted to bring those two up.
Those are great examples. Thank you for sharing, Jack. Do we have this, the last slide then, Maritza? I think we're
Yes,
here
it
at the end
is,
of the
which
book.
is
And we're
fortuitous.
almost here at the end of the time too. So Maritza, do you have thoughts about what we should do next? I know normally we do breakout rooms, although this has just been a different format. I think it's worked really well for this chapter too, just getting
Right.
to hear everybody's thoughts on all these different topics.
Yes.
But we do have a hard stop too in 10 minutes, because there is a meeting directly after this one. You do have to log out of this Zoom and log into the other link, but you'll find it on the 52 Living Ideas meetup page. And the 9 o'clock session is going to be with CJ, all about what you have learned from the comprehensivism series in just a few minutes. But Maritza, did you have some last thoughts here for what we should do here at the end?
Very briefly, you know, I heard in JP's points, I heard a lot of it's something that MC only touches upon briefly in the chapters, but it's that the caution to us about any of our flow activities having the potential to become addictive. And so I think the key is what Joya was telling us of, you know, we need to remember flow is being present in the moment. When you start finding yourself like, oh, I need to get back there. If that's where you're thinking and that's where you're focusing is on trying to resume, then you're not quite in the moment and you're not going to find yourself quite in the flow state. And I think that is the danger of forgetting that it should be in the moment. And I can see why on the you know, studies of Buddhism side, these are things that are regarded as they're too, you know, we're holding ourselves too like steady, too strictly. If we're focusing on these like temporary pleasures that they're fleeting and maybe not as advantageous for us. So I kind of see that there, the idea, the very last line here in this slide is something I really, well, the last two lines, which I lie, the whole bullet. I find that it's a different spin on why do we care about flow? Why do we want to control our consciousness and find a way towards flow? Because we want forward movement, right? And the way I view it is, and this is not MC's words, but mine are, we're seeking that meaningful path. And if we're seeking that meaningful path, a path implies movement. So we're seeking forward movement. And the way in which I can make my peace with the fact that I am in seek and flow. I am enjoying or maybe seeking slightly, softly, these temporary pleasures. It's because of the statement here that repression is not the way to virtue, right? So if I'm restraining myself out of fear for being too caught up on a temporary pleasure, well, then I'm diminishing my ability for this forward movement towards my most meaningful path. And that, and he also states here that, I might become a little rigid, I might become a little defensive. And why would I care about that? Because my self stops growing. And that would be like super detrimental, because forward movement is the most important lesson that we want from this. The only way to achieve any type of flow is through forward movement. And so, fantastic point, JP. And I think that in his own way, MC does agree with you. They just come at it from different angles. Guys, this was most enjoyable. I really think this format was great for us today. And I look forward to see you next week. We're going to talk about flow in our thoughts. So I look forward to seeing all of you there. All right, Joya, take us home.
Yep. 2 weeks from today, actually. 2 weeks.
Oh, yes. Apologies.
From today,
yes.
but the next session. Yes. And we're going to go from the body to the mind, talk about the flow of thought. And then just don't forget, directly after this, there is another 52 Living Ideas meetup. The link is there in the chat, and hope to see you all in 2 weeks. See you next time, everybody.
Thanks all. It was a good call. Good discussion.
Great times, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Right.
I like
Hi,
your
Mika.
names. Hey.
Oh, thank you. I'll give you a minute and you'll have whipped some up on your own. How's it going? Oh, the dress is behind you.
Yeah, it is.
It looks shorter on the mannequin.
Yeah, it does. But I got some shorts to wear underneath of it, so I'll be okay.
Nice. Very exciting. I'm jealous. I want to go. Sorry, Joya.
No. I was just going to say, do we have any last things? Or you and Nizzy can just talk. Nizzy, you're a designer?
No, not really a designer.
He's a
Beautiful.
designer. She lies.
I would say whatever is behind her is beautiful. So
He's a comprehensivist and doesn't know it.
Polymath.
Comprehensivist.
Polymath.
That whole session. I wish I attended that.
She's an engineer
And a designer.
Who happens to create entire outfits that look like store-bought quality. She makes jewelry. She has a black belt in Krav Maga. She's I think she's amazing, in case you haven't noticed. She's a gardener.
And is her black belt black from overuse? That's
probably
a great
not.
story.
She's also a little OCD. But yeah, she's one of the people, when I think of comprehensivism, she's actually one of the first people I think of.
That's awesome.
She doesn't even know it.
I have to look into that concept now. I'm curious.
It's a generalist. It's a fancy name for somebody who's a generalist.
A Renaissance woman. She's a Renaissance.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I do have a lot going on. I actually, it's funny. I was thinking yesterday, I was like, you know what? I don't know how to do that I want to try is make shoes. And I was like, I think that's like the last piece of the puzzle here.
You don't want to join me in learning how to play guitar? You have the fingers for it, unlike my short and stubby ones.
Music, I can't, it just does not flow.
I'm not convinced it does for me either, but I'm ornery and determined, so we'll see.
I do have drums, so every now and again I try, but it just does not come with any natural ability.
She makes amazing things, though. Just about, there's very little I've seen her try that she fails at. Very little.
Well, I gotta add shoes now. We'll see.
Well, you know, if you're taking requests for heels,
I would say if you need somebody to try them out.
right? All right, folks, I'm gonna go
to
stretch for
see you
2
all.
minutes before the
Yep.
9 o'clock one. Bye,
All right,
Nika. It
have
was
a
nice
good
seeing
night.
you.
Next time.
Yeah.